All right, it looks like our numbers have stabilized a little bit, and we are going to get started. It's our pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar, A Glimpse into the Forest. Today's workshop is part of the Arts Integration webinar series, The Science Around Us, presented by Southern Utah University and Weber State University. My name is Samantha Steffen. I'm the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Arts Learning Program Coordinator in the Arts Learning Collaborative at Weber State University, and I will invite Elisa to introduce herself.
Yes, I'm Elisa Peterson, and I'm the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Endowed Chair of Elementary Arts Education at Southern Utah University here in Cedar City, and I direct the Arts Fusion program here.
Before we jump into the webinar, I'll cover a few housekeeping items and introduce today's presenters and go over the schedule. If you need any tech support during the webinar, please call 801-626-7051 or email Braden Russell at weber.edu. That contact information will be in the chat shortly. We suggest you view today's webinar on a laptop or desktop computer for the best viewing experience. You can adjust window sizes by using the slider in the border located in between the shared presentation and presenter boxes. At the conclusion of the webinar, we will provide you with a link to a survey. When we receive your completed survey, we will award you relicensure hours in MIDAS. Also, by the end of next week, we will add you to a Google Drive folder that will contain today's presentation and other resources. We're recording today's webinar and we'll add that to the Google folder when it's ready. Don't forget your materials for today's webinar. The list is in the chat. We encourage you to work alongside our presenters today as they demonstrate different arts integration activities and approaches. Make sure you have single-sided printed copies of the layer book templates. We encourage you to start coloring your templates to get a head start for that portion of the webinar. We have some amazing presenters for our webinar today. We have Dr. Amy Miner joining us from InFocus Education Group. We will hear from Dr. Bridget Hilbig and Saya Barbera from Weber State University. We have Elisa Peterson from Southern Utah University, Aaron Roundy from Weber State University, Kelly Bruce Glynn from Utah Valley University, Penny Kaywood from the University of Utah, and again, I'm Samantha Steffen from Weber State University. We have a busy schedule for the next 2 hours together as well. After these housekeeping items, we will start with Amy giving us connections to the USBE standards. Then we'll look at Utah's forests with Bridget and Saya from a botany lens. Elisa will lead us in a visual art activity, making a forest succession class mural. Then you'll hear from me with some forest compositions. Aaron will lead us in visual art activities to make forest layer books. We'll hear from Kelly exploring the forest traits through movement and acting out the forest from Penny Kaywood. And then we'll tie it all up back together with Amy again, reinforcing some of those connections to the USBE standards. At the very end, you will have a chance to share the artwork that you're creating during this webinar, and then we will also have a Q&A and a survey for you to complete. As a reminder, because we do have some people joining us, trickling in, please make sure you have a single-sided copy of the layer book templates. A link is in the chat, and we invite you to work alongside our presenters today and to start coloring your layer book templates to get a head start for that portion of our webinar. Our learning intentions and success criteria for this webinar are for you to take part in an arts integrated activity to connect science and the arts and to explore the USBE standards and how they align. At the end of this webinar, you should have at least one idea of how to integrate science and art in your classroom and be able to recognize intersections and overlaps in the USBE standards. And now I will invite Amy Miner to share some Utah standards connections.
Hey everyone, nice to be with you today. So I get to take on the role of teaser. Like, you know, when you go to see a really good movie that's coming out and somebody tells you about what's coming. So that's me today. So go ahead and forward to the next screen, Samantha. So one of the things that I was asked to do is really ground the webinar today in our USPE science, seed standards, and engineering practices. So one of the ways I would love you to think about it is you look at the different activities and as you experience this wonderful integrated webinar, is what opportunities can you see to engage students in asking questions, defining problems, analyzing and interpreting data, even using mathematics and computational thinking as they're studying the forest, constructing explanations and designing solutions. And whenever we see words like construct and design, that's an invitation for the arts. Additionally, obtaining, evaluating, and communication, also another invitation for performing and sharing. And I want you to think about these global and more broad practices and skills as part of our conversation connected to our science standards. Let's go to the next slide and look specifically at what we might be watching for. We know that we have educators on the webinar today representing all of the different grades and art forms and various roles. And so we wanted to give you just a sneak peek at where the content from today's webinar aligns with those USBE science and seed standards. If you're looking in first grade, you're going to see things specifically connected to living things and their offsprings. And although our content today is all about forests, forests fit into the larger category of plants and trees. So whenever we're looking at plants and living things that have external features that help them to survive in a variety of environments and habitats, that's part of the content we're studying today. Go ahead and let's look at second grade. We expand living things into various habitats. And here's where we're really watching for the specific parts of a habitat, the water, the air, the resources that are needed and also found in the various habitats. So when we're looking at forests, what kinds of things are in the environment that not only help our forests to thrive, but to also continue to grow and evolve to be their ultimate and ideal environment. In this one, we're also looking right down to the microscopic level when we talk about structure and function. And it'll be fun to hear from our experts on that when we look at all the intricate kinds of things that teach us about different trees at different levels within our environment. That expands into third grade as we move on to the next one when we're really talking about the changes that organisms go through, various cycles that include seasons, that includes growth, it includes death or natural disasters and how we regrow from those experiences. And this is where students start being asked to construct explanations about the environment and what can affect and impact the environment. This is where we step in as citizens and think about our role as humans and how we interact and impact. In fourth grade, we move into how those organisms function within the environment, just taking that deeper, both in the past and in the present. This also includes some interaction with animals. And in fifth grade, as we move in, we talk about the cycling of matter. This would be where we start talking about decomposers and all the different functions that happen within, in our case today, our forest habitat. Wrapping this up in sixth grade, we're again looking at stability and change. What can we do in terms of observation and watching how matter cycles and flows through different living and non-living parts of an ecosystem? But also, what can we do to help create greater stability within our forest system? So those are the science standards that ground our conversation today. As you're listening to the various art forms and listening more about our Utah forests in particular, be watching for those kind of key engineering skills, but also these topics that take us through the different habitats, ecosystems, systems, patterns, and stability. Okay, turning it back to you, Samantha.
Thank you so much, Amy. We are jumping right into our botany forest information. So I think we're going to hear a lot of those same ideas. For some of our webinar portions tonight, we will be using pre-recorded videos. We were happy to have Dr. Bridget Hilbig and Saya Barbera from Weber State University's Department of Botany and Plant Ecology sit down with me for an interview. We're going to watch their interview and learn about Utah's forest habitats.
Hello, I'm Samantha Steffen, BTS Arts Program Coordinator with Weber State University in the Arts Learning Collaborative.
Today I'm joined by Bridget Hilbig and Saya Barbera from Weber State's Department of Botany and Plant Ecology to talk a little bit about Utah's forests. Thank you so much for joining me today. Let's start by introducing yourselves and saying a little bit about what you do.
Sure. So I'm Bridget Hilbig. I am an associate professor and the chair of the Botany and Plant Ecology department here. So in that capacity, I teach classes in plant biology, botany. I teach fungal classes as well as soil classes. And my research is on mycorrhizal ecology, which is, I'll kind of break that down. It's a symbiotic relationship between plant roots and fungi. And so I study how those relationships impact ecosystem dynamics.
I'm Saya Barbera. I'm working with the Botany and Plant Ecology Department as their botany community educator. I also graduated from Weber State last spring with my bachelor's degree in zoology and a minor in botany. I've also participated in some undergraduate research projects with Dr. Hilbig. And yeah, I'm really passionate about what I do. I collaborate with local educators and teachers on how to involve the plant sciences into their classroom and curriculum. That's great. So what inspired each of you to become a botanist?
So I mean, I grew up outside and I think I wanted a job where I could play outside. And that's really where it started. So when I was an undergrad, I went into biology and I knew I didn't want to dissect things. I didn't want to be pre-med. And so I ended up being in a faculty member's research lab who studied ecotoxicology, so how chemicals are impacting ecosystem dynamics. And I wasn't super excited about that, but she was such a great mentor and helped me find ways to make plants like a viable career for me.
That's great. Yeah. I similar in route where I've always loved the outdoors and I've always loved animals. When I was younger, I feel like so much of secondary education is really focused on animals specifically. So that was kind of where I came into it. And when I started taking classes at Weber, specifically those around like conservation biology, that was when I came to having an awareness that what I want to actually do is more focused on conservation and restoration biology and ecology specifically. And I also started taking botany classes and similar in where I was very influenced by my mentors and the instructors and professors that I had. And I kind of developed this love of botany and the plant sciences and looking at the environment really holistically and realizing that's kind of how we can apply these successful and well practiced management practices. Very cool. So if a student wants to go into botany, what are some kinds of jobs that they could have?
So I think maybe people first think of gardening when they think of botany. And I would encourage them to think about it more as it's a biology, right? It's just the biology of plants. And so things that you could do with a biology degree, you could do with a botany degree. So maybe we're talking about forests, we might think immediately of those outside jobs that I wanted when I was a kid, right? So you have certainly those ecology, conservation types of jobs that are with federal agencies, state agencies. You have education that you could go into. But I think also people don't realize how many lab technician types of jobs there are, particularly in like molecular biology, biotechnology. Um, you can get a job looking at how genes and molecules in the cell, how those can be changed for better crop security, or how they could be utilized for drug development. So there's a really wide range of jobs that you could get.
Wow, that's really interesting. Um, Saya, can you give an example of an activity teachers can do with their students that might get them interested in botany? Yeah, for sure. So we just recently did a teacher workshop focused on phenology with the botany department, and there were a few activities and examples that we talked about with our teachers who attended. I recommended for them something along the lines of like a nature journal where they could maintain that
whether it was throughout the semester or the year, students could go out and catalog their observations that they're making, any changes that they see in whether it's, the weather or a specific species. It puts this lens of how am I watching the climate or the weather and the environment change. Another thing we talked about was maybe starting something along the lines of like a miniature herbarium in a classroom and having that also kind of collected and maintained by students. And the teachers can teach their students how to collect, identify, press, and label these plant species. And again, it puts them in that role of a scientist, an herbarium organizer or curator. And yeah, those were just a few activities that teachers seem to really enjoy. I love that. That sounds really interesting. Can you give an overview? We know these are very varied, but can you give an overview of forest habitats in Utah?
Yeah, so as you said, there are many types of forest habitats in Utah. I think we don't think about that they actually cover a third of Utah's land. We think of Utah and we think of red rocks, but forests actually cover a third of our land. And when we name forests, it's usually for the dominant species. So it's something like an Engelmann spruce forest. The most common forest in Utah is a pinyon juniper forest. These are really drought tolerant forests that you find in southern Utah, a little bit lower elevation. If you were to go up in elevation, you might find aspen groves, right? And everybody in Utah is well aware of aspens. We have Pando here, right? So it's the oldest living colonial organism on the planet. And then if you continue up, then you get into your conifer types of forests. So again, named usually for the dominant species, but any conifer forest is predominantly a cone-bearing species. So needles, think evergreens. So you have Engelmann spruce, you have ponderosa pine, and those are, yeah, restricted to higher elevation. And those are kind of maybe three broad forests, but then you also have riparian forests. So I could go all day.
Wow, that's yeah, something when we were doing some of our research is all the different kinds of forests in Utah that we don't always think about. So that's really interesting. So you've done research related to forest ecology. Can you tell us a little bit about what forest succession is and a little bit about your research?
Sure. So succession is a natural process that happens following usually a disturbance where you have kind of an opening in the plant community, so bare space. And typically what happens is you have what we call kind of early successional species that come in. These are usually grasses, annuals, things that are easily able to establish. And then over time, like a very long time, you move into shrubs and then maybe forest ecosystems in kind of a natural succession. So this is kind of large spatial and temporal scale. I study on a much smaller scale plant soil feedbacks really and how plants and soil microbial communities, particularly mycorrhizal fungi, which are those mutualistic fungi that grow within the roots of plants, how those dynamics can change how plant communities assemble. So it can contribute to the overall succession of an area.
So we're talking about how a forest grows back over time, basically, in the patterns that happen there.
Yeah, so our current research project is post-fire. So fire is a very large disturbance. We went into areas where you had stand replacing burns. So these are like mega burns that burn everything down to the ground. And so what we're looking at is, okay, well, what's also happening maybe below ground and how will that feed back into what first comes into this area? And then over longer time, how might that actually change the direction of succession or the timeline?
That's very cool. Yeah. Why are Utah's forests important, and why should students and adults learn about them? Yeah, so Utah is one of those really special places where there are a lot of endemic species and there are a lot of native species that are characteristic to Utah specifically and our forests. Um, like Dr. Hilbig mentioned, right, we have our pinyon juniper forest, we have our quaking aspen forest, these forests that are known for their dominant species. And it's really important because these species, they function as such a foundational role within the ecosystem. So they themselves provide some sort of function, whether it is widespread or more symbiotic and focused on species to species. It can really foster a sense of responsibility and stewardship in our residents. And it can allow them to see that not only can they recreate in them and have fun in them, but their importance in the fact that they're an ecosystem and they provide those functions. Yeah.
I just want to maybe echo on what Saya said, that these forests are providing a really critical ecosystem service for all of us, which is purifying air and purifying our water. And so in that way, they're really critical to conserving.
What do you wish more people knew about Utah's forests?
So I think that there are so many different types of forests, and they're all kind of a cog in the wheel. And if you lose one forest or maybe even just one species within a forest, it can cause kind of cascading effects. And that these forests really, they have not just massive environmental impacts in our lives, but they also have the economic impacts that Saya was talking about. We have the timber industry, we have the recreational industry, we have, tourism. People travel all over to go to Dixie National Forest, and that, I guess I would end on, it's really important for us to conserve them, because they're playing such a vital role for our lives, but also, the lives of many other types of organisms. And yeah, I think I would say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, it's a big question, but can you talk about the plants and animals living in Utah's forest in terms of what kind of environmental factors they've had to adapt to and how they have adapted to survive? Yeah, so again, there is so much variance when we look at our forests and our ecosystems in general, all throughout Utah. And there are a lot of extreme conditions that they've had to adapt to, whether it is high elevation or drought, and things that are really going to shape the way that these species and these ecosystems look at. So we can look at a forest like the pinyon juniper forest, where they have these really deep roots in order to source out any type of water. They also have really, like, their superficial roots can spread as well to take advantage of any sort of heavy precipitation event. So we have species like that. But looking at animal species, we have species that migrate in response to really harsh conditions, whether it is, the heat or our winters. And we also have these really great generalists, like our cougars, who have adapted with large ranges, and they're able to live and thrive in areas because they can kind of tolerate a high range of whether it is really hot or really cold. They have those adaptations that allow them to successfully live in those areas. How can teachers and students be good stewards of our forests as citizens of Utah? I feel like it does come down to education and learning about them. When they get passionate about these spaces, I think you start to see people care a lot more for them. And I think recreating is absolutely an option, but research, so much of my personal love has evolved from research of that and learning about not only these like large scale interactions going on, but also, we can look at these smaller scale interactions and their impact from them and their influence, even though they seem like they're kind of happening on a more microscopic level, they're so influential. So yeah, I feel like so much of that love can come from learning about them, being in these spaces, and also being around communities that focus on protecting these spaces. And I think Utah, there are organizations, there are environments, there are spaces where people do loudly advocate for our natural resources, and that is so important. Is there anything we didn't ask you that you want people to know? I would say when it comes to representation of scientists specifically, I came into it not really seeing a lot of people that looked like myself in these scientific spaces. And I've just found so much support and encouragement from my mentors and my advisors who have really advocated for people like me and again, people who maybe are typically underrepresented in these spaces to be here and to feel confident about being here. So I would just say that science and research and just learning about the world in general, it's for everybody. And I would highly recommend that people, look to projects and different things like this to feel passionate and learn about these spaces.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today to help us learn more about Utah's amazing forests.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right. I would also like to thank Dr. Heather Root from WCU's Department of Botany and Plant Ecology for allowing us to use photos from her research in our video. Some of those images you saw are from her in the field, and we're really excited about that. Bridget and Saya were not able to attend our webinar tonight, but they did ask me to pass along a little bit of information. If you're interested in learning more about forests and plants and how to include them in your curriculum, they have an upcoming K-12 teacher workshop called Rooting Plants in Utah K-12 curriculum on June 10th and 11th in 2025. There's a stipend for attending, lunch is provided, and this flyer will be included in your digital Google folder after this webinar. Now I will invite Elisa Peterson to lead us in a visual art activity about forest succession.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I have to say that I didn't know a lot about forests until I started thinking about this webinar months and months ago, and they are amazing. I'm really excited about what I've learned and what I'll share with you tonight, and I'm excited to continue learning. So if we can go to the next slide, I want to show you, this is a diagram of forest succession. I loved hearing about that in the video. This is how well, I'll just read the statement that it says here. Ecological succession is the predictable, progressive change of a biological community over time to its climax state. This illustrates a grassy field evolving into a climax forest community. So as they said in the video just now, when you have a clearing in a forest based on a disturbance of some kind, whether it's a human disturbance or a fire or a storm that's caused trees to fall down, we have this empty space. And as things grow back over time, that is succession. And I learned so much about kind of all of the life sciences standards, just like Amy Miner went over today. They all can be taught through forest succession if we learn about it. So as you can see in this diagram, at the very beginning, we just have small plants. These are things like small grasses, and then we get shrubs. We get something that's called a forb. That's a new word that I just learned, F-O-R-B. That means a broad-leafed herbaceous plant, so herbs and flowers. Oftentimes they're perennial. Then we get small saplings and trees. They're growing, and then over time, different things happen as things. Some plants block the sunlight, or other plants make space in the shade or the canopy, so more sunlight can come through. As trees get knocked down, and other plants, they decompose and provide other resources in the habitat for animals and plants to grow. And so we'll look a little bit more into this in just a minute, but I'd like to show you a Padlet that I set up to use as a resource for you during this webinar. So I'm going to share my screen in just a moment. Great. So this Padlet, I'm wondering if we can get the link to this Padlet in the chat so you can take a look at it in just a minute. I've just gathered some resources here for you to take a look at. These are plants and animals that grow in Utah forests, and we know that they're so varied, as we heard in the video. So these may or may not grow together, but they'll just give you some ideas of what's possible. So we have these grasses here, and each of these will take you to a website where you can see more pictures if you're interested. In just a moment, I'm going to have you choose a few of these things to draw, maybe one or two small plants, a few trees, and maybe an animal. So we have grasses, forbs, shrubs, and small trees, And then this continues to, you can scroll and we have larger trees and then also some animals that you may see in Utah forests. So we'll look at those. I'm going to go ahead and stop my sharing and get ready to show the video in just a moment. But be thinking about a few animals and plants that you'd like to draw. Before we show the video, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're going to do. I'm imagining a class creating a mural that looks quite a bit like this document here. And it starts over here on this side with the first years after a disturbance and goes farther and farther into an older forest. And I'm just remembering that I forgot to show you a few slides. So we're going to come back to this in just a moment, but let's go ahead and move on to the next slide because this shows some real pictures. So right at the beginning after a disturbance, the first plants that grow in, they're often called pioneer plants. And these plants, they need to tolerate the sun because there's nothing covering them anymore. So they can take direct sun and they really establish themselves well and they start to provide sort of shade for small animals like rodents, mice and snakes and gophers. And it starts providing this real diversity in the environment. And then after just a little bit, trees start coming in. So if we go to the next slide, quaking aspens are pioneer plants because they, as we know, are connected underground and they can come up really easily. And one thing that they love is the sunshine. So if nothing's covering them up, then they can come right up and establish themselves really well. Okay, next slide. But what's interesting is when all of those aspens grow and fill in a stand like this, check out what's down on the ground here. A lot of the diversity that we were seeing in that field will kind of die out because the sun is blocked and all those sun-loving plants can't grow. But as we can see here, some trees that are shade tolerant start coming up. And so firs really are okay to grow in the shade and they'll start growing up in a stand of aspen trees. Okay, next slide. You can see as they get taller and taller, and we'll keep going kind of quickly. Awesome, and they're growing even further. And next slide, awesome. And you can see they're starting to outcompete those aspens as they get even taller. Okay, next slide. And this one shows an area where the fir trees have gotten so big that they're blocking a lot of the sunlight for aspens. And what happens is these trees, since they love the sun so much, they start dying a little bit and they're not as strong and they'll fall down and create a mini disturbance where there's more sunlight and things can start growing back again. And so the succession of forests takes hundreds of years and it depends on what's happening and if there's another fire or other disturbances. But over time, if you don't have a fire or disturbance, you'll get to the climax forest, which we see all the way on the right side here, where it's kind of an old growth forest where the trees are big and they're the ones that will stay there until there's another disturbance. So you're imagining that your class is going to create a mural that's similar to this picture. You would assign each student the plants and animals that they would create, or you could assign them a stage. So maybe the plant stage or shrub stage or young plant or young forest. And then they can think about, will I have small trees or big trees? Will I have lots of forbs and grasses on the ground, or will they be shaded out and I'll have less? And you can have them start choosing what they would like to draw to represent in the whole group project. And we'll watch a video now that will show you a little bit about how you might have students go about this project. And you can draw along with me if you want. This will be kind of a short video, but be thinking of what you'd like to create on your own. Okay, let's go ahead and watch this. I have chosen to draw a snake, so I'm making it kind of small, just in the corner of this piece of paper. I recommend that you use a photo reference for your drawing. I'm looking at one on my computer here. I do this even with really young children. You can give them an iPad or just have them look on a computer or print out some photos that they can use, because this helps them really look at the animal or the plant and consider all the shapes and all the colors and textures. Now I'm using construction paper crayons, which have just a little bit of white mixed into them, so you don't get all the colors that you normally get. You have a limited palette, but it lets those colors show up really bright and vibrant on darker paper, which I think is really fun. The next thing I'm going to do is outline this drawing with black permanent marker. And that's really great because it helps the drawing really pop out from the background. You can see it from far away. Since this project is going to be kind of a mural that will be hung on the wall, you'll really want those objects to be quite visible, stand out from the background. The next thing I'm doing is just coloring around my animal a little bit. I'm using, I think, a green crayon here. This is completely optional, but I love the bright little pop of color that you can see around the object. And this gives you a little bit of a bubble of space around the item, which will make it a little bit easier for small hands to cut out the shapes. And that's the last thing you do, just cut it out. Now I'm drawing a gamble oak, and I wanted to show you just how simple it can be to draw a plant like this. It doesn't have to be really realistic or lifelike. This kind of tree has kind of multiple trunks, so I just quickly drew those in and then went around them to make the shape of the greenery. It can be loose and almost cloud-like. Then just like before, you can color it in. You can encourage the students to blend or mix colors or add texture anywhere that they see that in their photo reference. And then trace around everything with a marker, just like we did before. Add some color around it if you want to, and then cut out the entire shape. Finally, I just want to show you the variety of plants that you can draw for this project and animals, and show you how simple they can be and while still being interesting. You want to look for big shapes, for textures, for colors, and just keep things simple. You also want to think a little bit about scale. So small animals should be able to fit down in between the bushes, shrubs, and flowers, forbs. And then when you get to trees, you can draw trees together in a stand or draw them singly. You can draw small little ones, medium-sized trees, and tall ones, because remember, in succession, it's about how the forest is changing over time as everything grows. Okay, so at this point, I'd love to have you try this out. So go to that Padlet, it looks like the link is in the chat, and choose a few things that you'd like to draw. You can gang them up on the same page so that they fit together, and cut them out and just start making a little collection or a little pile. And while you're working, I thought maybe it would be fun to read a book to you so that you can listen, maybe glance at the pictures as we go. So this book is called The Glorious Forest That Fire Built. And if I could have custom ordered a book, this would be the one. It's amazing that it really talks about fire succession in a way that is poetic and really beautiful, as you'll see in the illustrations. Now, this book was created, oh, I can't read it, it's too small. It was created by a woman named Ginny Neal. She's both the author and illustrator, and she teaches, I think, art and science workshops for schools and teachers. And she just really knows what she's talking about. So let's go to the next page and start reading this. She says, I am the forest. And I love when we look in this forest, you can see that the undergrowth is kind of a little bit bare. It's not very thick. And I think that's because there's a lot of shade in this forest. Okay, next page. I am the fire with flames whirling round. I swallow the forest. Next page. I spit out black ground. I love this page that shows us how a fire doesn't take everything all the way to the ground all the time. We can have trunks that are partially burned, or trees that are still a little bit alive, but just a little damaged, and we can have things that are burned all the way down. Okay, next page. I am the meadow, buried deep down beneath the black ashes. I rise upward bound. This is awesome because so many things that are burned in a forest fire, they still survive with their roots underground. Trees and quite a few plants can live down under the soil, and so they can come back kind of quickly. And that's what we're seeing here. Okay, next page. I tangle and flower and fruit all around. My leaves and my shade help to heal the burdened ground. I'm not here to stay. I'm a step on the way to the glorious forest that fire built. This page shows how much biodiversity really comes back after a fire. We're always, a little sad when we hear about fire burning in our state, but it's really nice to know that this can happen. It can be quite a positive thing. And I'm imagining what's happening down in the soil, thinking about the scientists that we just heard from. What's happening there in the soil that's allowing these things to grow back quickly? And on the next page, we see how seeds spread as well. And I know that this is something I think that we learn about in second grade. I am the seeds in the wind, whirling around, spinning up, 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 and then twirling back down. I sprout where the meadow has healed the burned ground. I love thinking about the grasses, how they can heal the ground and put back in the nutrients that need to be there after the fire. Okay, next page. I am the pines with trunks skyward bound. I grew from the seeds that whirled and twirled down. This is that early sort of sapling stage. I love that she has included the animals all along the way. Okay, next page. My limbs brush the sky with a whoosh whooshy sound and shade out the meadow that healed the black ground. I'm not here to stay. I'm a step on the way to the glorious forest that fire built. I love, even there we could see a bird. I am the nuts all polished and brown, stored and forgotten where pine trees abound. I sprout in the shade of their sap-scented crowns and grow up, up, up as the pines tumble down. Some trees that grow in a forest are like the aspens can grow up because they're interconnected underground, and others grow back because chipmunks have stored those seeds down underground in a safe place. So after the fire, they take root and grow. And I love that this page talks about how some of the trees were shady and other trees are coming up now and the original ones are falling down. Okay, next page.
Lisa, we have a
Yes.
question in the chat that would
Oh,
be a
awesome.
good one to answer here. It says, what are they drawing on right now? Which
Oh.
material?
Yes, I should have mentioned that. The chipboard is what we're using. It's the heavier weight cardboard, and that's because we're going to use this later kind of in a three-dimensional relief. So yes, use the crayons, the Sharpie markers that are the thicker tip, and then also the heavier chipboard. We'll use the lightweight craft cardstock in the book project in just a little bit. Thank you for that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and if we go to the next page, perfect. Oh, I did want to say, I love that this book it takes us through seasons in the forest as well. I'm the forest where hardwoods abound. I grew from the nuts that were tucked all around. My leaves shade my roots, and in fall tumble down. Bare-limbed, I rest as snow coats the ground. Okay, next page. First I was ashes, then meadow, then seeds, then pine trees, then round nuts, then young hardwood trees. Each of these things is a small part of me. Next page. I'm the glorious forest that fire built, but I won't stay this way. All right, next page. I'm a new clearing where sunlight is found. I formed where a storm raged and blew some trees down. I'm sunlight and nurse logs and rich dirt, and then I'm the glorious forest beginning again. Let's talk about nurse logs a little bit. That's an amazing thing. We can see right here that there are little plants that are growing up out of these logs. So as they decompose, they became this amazing place for animals and plants to grow. They kind of nurse along these little seedlings. Well, I'll talk about it a little bit later. Let's go to the next page. Okay, that's, I believe, the end of the story, and it's talking about how things are going to keep going. Feel like Yep, that's correct. So the last page of this book has this, takes us back through succession, and this is talking about, is it 250 years, maybe 240 years, that this, from the fire to this climax community forest. And so it has a little bit of the science. It talks about the plants and the animals. It talks about sunlight and how that's cycling through matter through a forest. Talks about habitats of animals and all kinds of things. So it's kind of a beautiful book. And half of you who purchased or who received the supplies got this book in your supply kit. But we've also listed the information for this book in the lesson plan about fire forest succession murals. Okay, so I think we can just stay on this slide for a moment, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about the resources that I put together for you. I'm not going to look at them right now, but you'll receive them in an email in I think next week. The lesson plan talks about doing this mural project, but I recognize that people of different grades may want to do different things. And so I've provided suggestions for each grade from kindergarten up through grade 6 about the direction that you can focus on a group mural project about the forest. Maybe one grade focuses a little bit more on animals and their homes, where they live, their dens. Another grade might really focus on that cycling of matter and really showing that in the mural. Or you might choose to do the succession model that we're talking about now. I wanted to say that the animals and plants that I provided on the Padlet, I pulled those from a document that I'm linking to in the lesson plan. It's called Fire Ecology of Forests and Woodlands in Utah. And it's a little bit of an older document, so it has a disclaimer that the information may be kind of old, but it has some awesome information about the animals and the plants that live in Utah. But not only that, it also tells us about where they live and how they respond when there's been a fire. So if you've gone to the Padlet, you'll see a little bit of information underneath each object. For example, the low sagebrush says recovery may take within 2 to 5 years on favorable sites. And talks about how coyotes can survive in all of the succession stages, and they use hollow logs or stumps for their dens, and they prey on mice. So coyotes actually increase, and they like using burned areas because as the meadows grow back, they support abundant small mammal populations, and that's perfect for coyotes to eat. So they kind of look for those areas and thrive there, which I think is so interesting. Let's see. The broom snakeweed is kind of a yellow small shrub, and it increases after fire because their seedlings can establish really quickly. So the information on Padlet is just sort of the tip of the iceberg of what I've provided or what's provided in the document that I'm linking to on the lesson plan. But for now, I want to go ahead and show you a video. And this tells you what to do once your students have all created pieces. And each student can create, based on the research that they do, they can create multiple pieces to add to the group mural. So if you have 25 students in your class and they each make 3 different things, you can have a forest that has 75 different parts, which is pretty fun. So let's go ahead and watch this short video.
This project gets really fun when you start putting it together like a mural. You can do this up on the wall as a mural or down on a table or the floor. Just put down some cardboard and cover it with butcher paper to represent foreground, maybe in green, and background, the sky in blue, and you can put mountains in as well if you want to. At this point, you can think back to the forest succession handouts that we have and imagine students arranging their work from left to right, left being the first thing that happens after a disturbance, and different stages of succession happening as you move toward the right. You can see here that I've just laid out these pieces. There are more grasses and forbs and shrubs to the left, and as we go toward the right, the trees get larger and larger. These are all just sitting on the paper, but what I like to do is give them a little bit of elevation using some small pieces of cardboard. So I cut cardboard into little strips, and then I cut those strips up into small squares. Now I'm just going to use a little bit of hot glue to attach a piece of cardboard to the back of one of these little flowers. And then I'll glue that down onto the background. This just adds the tiniest little bit of height, which gives a little shadow line behind the picture. It helps it feel more like a relief than like a flat drawing. On this larger piece, I'm adding 2 pieces of cardboard, and sometimes I'll even do 3 or 4. This little bit of lift allows you to sort of overlap things in interesting ways. I always use cool temperature glue guns. That way students can add their own pieces without getting burned. For the pieces that go all the way toward the back of the mural, I tend to just glue them flat down onto the background without those little pieces of cardboard. As I work my way toward the front, I like to sort of add more height. So sometimes I'll add the little pieces of cardboard 2 deep or even 3 deep to make those pieces toward the front seem a little bit closer to you, pop out from the surface even more. I've done this kind of project with both children and adults, and it's always amazing to me how much joy and delight and just a sense of ownership comes from working together to put all of the pieces into one large work of art. Trust me, you'll love it, and they will too.
So my part is finished, and this is something that obviously you don't have a class mural to assemble right now, but imagine what it would be like with each child adding their pieces, and they can talk about what might go in front and what would go in behind. They would talk about, oh, let's have younger trees here and some larger trees over here. It's just a wonderful way for them to work together and discuss the information that they've been learning with you. I think that is my last slide, so I will turn the time back to Samantha. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elisa.
This project gets really fun when you start.
All right. There were a couple questions in the chat during there about the resources. All of these, the videos, links, the lesson plans, information about the books that we're using will all be sent out in the Google folder by next Friday, April 18th, I believe. So we'll share all of that with you. You can see the videos are also embedded in this slideshow. It just doesn't always like to share with great sound quality via Zoom. So we're sharing them a little different in here, but they'll all be in the slideshow when we share that out. And we also want to kind of remind you that you can keep working on these projects over the course of the webinar as you're watching this next video or any that were coming later. You can keep working on these, and we'll really want to see what you are working on at the end of this webinar. So now we'll watch a music video about composing music to represent an aspen forest.
Hello, I'm Samantha Steffen, BTS Arts Program Coordinator at Weber State University in the Arts Learning Collaborative. Today we're going to use music and science to create an aspen forest composition. According to the National Forest Foundation, aspen trees are the most widespread tree in North America. These trees are distinct and eye-catching with their white bark, quaking leaves, and yellow fall colors. Here in Utah, we have aspen trees across the state. One of the most notable things about aspen trees is they grow in clusters or clones. A cluster of aspen trees is actually one single organism stemming from the same root system. Each tree, or stand, is genetically the same as the next. In music, the term ostinato refers to a continually repeated melodic or rhythmic pattern. This pattern can be repeated throughout the whole piece of music or just a section. One famous example from classical music is the rhythmic ostinato in Mars from the Planets by Gustav Holst. If you listen to Mars, you'll hear this rhythmic pattern repeated throughout the movement. Since aspen trees are actually multiple iterations of the same tree, and ostinatos are repeating patterns, we're going to use an ostinato to be our aspen clone. We're going to imagine we've split our class into groups of 3 or 4 students who are going to create a group composition, representing an aspen forest. Let's imagine our class of upper elementary students has been working on reading and writing rhythms and melodies, that they know how to correctly play certain instruments, and that this isn't their first time composing. This imaginary group has a lot of music knowledge and experience, so our focus here is on the structure, steps, and limitations designed for this activity. I'm asking each group to compose 16 beats, which is 4 measures in 4/4 time, for 3 instruments, and I'm breaking down the composition into 3 steps. Step 1 is to compose the ostinato. Our ostinato is our aspen clone, with its root structure sending up repeating trees. The ostinato can be rhythmic or melodic, but it needs to be simple enough to repeat each measure. An example of a rhythmic ostinato is, I can easily repeat this 4-beat pattern 4 times for 16 beats. I think for my aspen clone, I want to use a melodic ostinato. I could do just 1 note. I could use 2 notes together. I could use 2 or more notes separately. I think that one sounds like aspen trees growing from the ground up toward the sky. So I think I'm going to choose that for my ostinato. I'm going to fill out this ostinato composition sheet to show my rhythm and indicate my notes. I would have students copy the ostinato into all 4 boxes to illustrate that an ostinato repeats. When I'm designing this step for students, I list the rhythms, notes, and instruments they can choose from based on their experience level. It helps to keep an ostinato simple. Adding requirements such as ending on a quarter note can help set students up for success in their performance. Step 2 is to compose the melody. Our melody is the other plants and animals that live in our aspen forest. This is the step that requires the most planning and guidelines for students to be successful. I'm going to be using solfege for this step, but you can use letter names if you prefer. For this melody, I'm using the notes in the La minor pentatonic scale. In this case, our solfege note La is a D on my xylophone. I've removed my Fa and T xylophone bars, so all I'm left with are the notes in my scale that I've chosen as my tone set. The notes in our pentatonic scales sound good together, so using this as my tone set sets me up for a melody that sounds good. For less experienced students, or for students who don't know all of their La minor solfege notes yet, I would give them fewer notes to choose from, even if that's only 2 or 3. La do mi, so mi, and la so mi are all good options. For this melody, since I've given myself so many notes to choose from, I'm going to limit myself to only quarter and eighth note rhythms, and I'm going to make sure that I end my melody on a quarter note so it sounds finished. I'm also going to use ABAC form. This means that lines 1 and 3 are the same, while lines 2 and 4 are different. I'm going to end line 2 on Re, which in this case is a G on our xylophone, so it sounds like a question. And I'm going to end line 4 on La, which is our home note in La minor, so it sounds like an answer or an ending. I wrote this melody ahead of time using all of these requirements. Here's what my melody sounds like. Each one of my choices, a tone set that sounds good together, simple rhythms to play on the xylophone, a form where 2 lines are the same, and giving a few requirements for how certain lines end, made it so I could do almost anything in my melody and have it sound at least pretty good. Planning out and adjusting these requirements for your students are how you set them up for success. It's okay if you only give students a couple of rhythms and a couple of notes and ask them to compose 8 beats ending on a quarter note. You can even have them compose their rhythm one day and ask them to add notes ending on do or la another day. Very simplified but positive, successful composition experiences lead to more confidence in creating music as you add complexity in the future. Finally, step 3 is to compose a third part that represents something else in our forest environment. Students might use a drum to represent falling rocks, a cabasa or small rain stick to mimic how an aspen leaf sounds in the wind, or a bird whistle to mimic songbirds. I'm going to use a frog weiro today. These come in many sizes and students love them because they're shaped like frogs and kind of sound like frogs croaking. I'm going to use this little one because I think it sounds like crickets. I've gone ahead and written out my rhythm for my frog weiro on my composition sheet. Again, I'm using very simple rhythms and I'm ending on a quarter note. I would give my student groups one step at a time and check their work before letting them move on to the next step. With each step, they need to assign a group member to play that part in the performance. When they've composed all 3 parts, I'd give them some time to practice their composition together, including counting off and playing with a steady beat so they start, stay, and end together. Then each group would perform for the class. If my groups have 4 students, the 4th student would have the job of conductor and need to start the group and keep a steady beat. Let's listen to what my aspen forest composition sounds like all together. We've explored our forest composition today through the lens of a complex, multi-step activity that could take more than one lesson time. If your students have never composed before, don't be afraid to start with just one part. Even if your small groups only compose an ostinato, you could have them take turns performing it at each page turn as you read a book about forests. Your group could compose an ostinato one day and then add another part another day. You could skip the melody and just do the ostinato and part 3. You could even start with composing as a full class before moving to small group compositions. If you don't have instruments, you could have students use body percussion or classroom materials to play rhythms and create chants using forest vocabulary and phrases. Instead of writing compositions using traditional stick notation, students could use iconic notation or manipulatives to show long and short sounds and different pitch levels. I hope you have some ideas how to make this activity work for your students and meet them where they are. If we include structure in our design, we can guide our students to create successful compositions.
Now I'd like to invite Erin Roundy to come on and lead us in a visual art activity where we will create a layer book.
Let's try that again. Hello, everybody. Just give me a minute here just to get set up. All right, there we go. All right, I'm so glad to be with you guys here tonight. And I wanted to basically walk you through, not the woods necessarily, but through this Utah Habitats Layer book. It was actually inspired by this book called A Walk Through the Woods. And it is a form of a tunnel book. And a tunnel book in the book arts world or in the visual arts world is where you have a book that expands like an accordion. And so you're able to see through the different layers. This particular book tries to achieve that same thing, but in a 2-dimensional flat book format. As you can see, as I turn the pages over, each page has the center cut out. And this book takes us on this journey through this particular forest where we see different kinds of plant life and animal life that we could experience or see or hear throughout it. You can see that we have some birds here around these beautiful flowers. And we continue to take this journey through the woods, meeting other animals as well, coming across water. And then we're also following some that are escaping and getting away, and the different sounds that can be heard. Here again, we're greeted by some other, let me scooch this over. Sorry about that. Some other birds that can be found in this particular forest. And eventually we will get to the back of the book. And I really like this format because in visual art, one of the things that we do teach is this idea of translating things that are two-dimensional into something that is three-dimensional, or create the illusion that there is space and depth on a flat surface. And so I took this whole idea from this particular book, and just as Elisa mentioned, for those participants who received the kit, supply kit from tonight, some of you actually did receive this book. And for those who did not, of course, we will provide a link where you can purchase and find this book if you are interested in it. So I'm going to set this book aside, and I'm going to just show you my final version of my particular quote unquote tunnel book. But in this case, we're looking at layers and elevation. And instead of walking through space, we're walking up through different elevations here in Utah, found in forest habitats. So just real quickly, I just wanted to show you what the final looks like and point out the materials used for this particular one. Let me first say, too, for everybody out there, we provided you with the fact sheet, the illustrations, and the research basically in those fact sheets and the imagery for this book. But you as a teacher with your students, what I would encourage you to do, instead of providing them with everything that we provided you, because we were doing this just to save some time, is that your students, and this could be applied to not just forests, but different habitats in Utah and a variety of other curriculum that are found in the classroom, that you would have your students do the research. You would have them look at the habitat and look at the plant life and the trees and the animal lives that exist in those, and do the research and then identify. But we did this for you, like I said, just to expedite the whole process tonight. So you should have the following. We provided you with copies of title pages, or the title page. Let me put this in the right order. We provided you with lower elevation bird, plant, and trees, middle elevation, and then high elevation, which actually had 2 pages, just because the trees weren't going to fit with our background there. If you didn't get yours colored for tonight, that is okay. You can still assemble your book and color it after the fact. The other thing that we provided you with is, as I mentioned, the fact sheet. So this is just a quick overview and of each of the elements that we will be working with as we build this book. So it's not all inclusive, but it is just, like I said, a quick overview, a quick summary of the birds that are found, the plants and trees in these particular forests, in these elevations that we're going to be talking about. Also, I did want to say that it was written with adults in mind, or older students. So for those of you who maybe teach younger grades, this would need to be rewritten. If you wanted to take this type of a format for your students to help them with their research, this would obviously need to be adapted for younger students, because the vocabulary and some of the content just might be a little bit too much for them at this point. You also, on top of these things, we are using craft colored paper to create our book, in which you only need 3 sheets for this, and I will help you know how to cut them out, but you would only need 3 sheets. Of course, you do not need to use craft colored cardstock. Reason I chose this is for a couple. Number one, I like the kind of woodsy quality and color of it, kind of fits the theme of forest habitats. The other thing that I like about it is I do like how if you received one of the kits, you probably received a gold gel pen and a white one. And any gel pens look really good on top of craft paper. Actually, colored pencils, like light colored pencils, look really beautiful on this, because even though we provided you with the illustrations on white paper, your students could actually, just like with Elisa's workshop, they could actually draw their imagery on this and cut out. And just wanted to show you how gel pens work on these, and it's just fun to use them. Also, too, white could be used if you want to talk to your students, or if your students want to look at seasons in different habitats. You could use this for snow. And then with us talking about the forest habitats, we will be touching base on quaking aspens. If you haven't seen quaking aspens in the fall, it's one of the most magical experiences with the yellow gold color. So we gave you a gold one for those who got the kit, but not necessary to have to be able to complete this. We are using colored pencils, glue sticks, very simple things that you can find around. Also, we're just using these brass brads, and then you would need a ruler. The only reason the ruler is to help cut your book, and also we can use it to score the book so that it easily opens. So here's the book. You can see I have the title right here, and it opens to our lower elevation or lower level. So in visual art, if you remember as a child, when you were asked to draw a picture, typically you would draw the house lower on the paper to convey that it was closer to you. And then typically, as you would go through drawing, you put like your sun in the upper portion of the piece of paper to indicate that it is higher up or further away. And so this layer book is touching on those qualities that we talk about in visual art when we are creating a sense of depth, a sense of height on a flat surface. So we have our lower elevation right here. We turn the page, you will see our mid elevation. And then we get to the back side, we have our high elevation. So we are going to assemble this book together. And again, if you didn't get all of your pieces colored, that is okay. You can put the black and white ones in and color later. So I'm going to set this aside. So with your 3 pieces of paper that you have the cardstock here, I'm trying to make it super simple for you to be able to cut so you can create the layers. One of these pieces will just stay a full sheet. This will be the back of your book, and it will be the part where the higher elevation will go. So we can just set that aside. For our page 1 and page 3, it's only going to take one cut. So as you can see right here, if you take your ruler, and I'm going to kind of cheat and use a paper trimmer. But if you take your second sheet and using your ruler and marking it, if you go to 2 3/4 or 2.75, right about that. So I've just lined mine up, and you cut it, whether with a pair of scissors or if you happen to have a paper cutter handy. This is my 2 3/4, and it's just 8.5. This is the piece I just cut, and this one is 8 1/4 by 8.5. So this is just created just by with this one cut. I have where my title is going to go, and I have my 3rd page. So I'm going to take my back page. I'm going to put my 3rd page on top of that, set that aside, and set my small one. And I'm going to take this last piece right here, this full sheet, and I'm going to create page 2. In page 2, we're just going to cut this in half. So at 5.5, we're just going to come in and cut this in half. And I have just created my 2nd page. So this one would go right here. And then I can take my little title page of my book. And there, I know it's, if you can see that, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so that is the base of our layers right there. All of this information, again, will be in a lesson plan that will be provided for you when we send out the Google folder next week. Now, because we're using cardstock, because it has a little more weight, it's kind of more difficult to keep open. So we're going to have to score or bend or fold so that our book can more easily open. There's a lot of ways that you can do this, but one of the most simplest ways to do this is to take a ruler and a popsicle stick. And I measured in just a 1/2 inch. So if I just come take my ruler and line it up with 1/2 inch, and I take my popsicle stick, and I understand that for younger students, this would be difficult, but I just wanted to show this, that if you take a popsicle stick, it can act like a score. So it's not cutting the pages, paper, excuse me, it is bending the fibers. So I just push it against the side of my ruler. And though you can't see it, it has created this little crease that makes it easier for me to fold it. Okay. So that's one way that you can create these folds. The other is, because this cardstock isn't very heavy duty, you can also just fold it. But I would encourage you and your students to do this, because once you put the book together, particularly down here where you will have 4 pages with the title and page 2, 3, 4, that's pretty thick and kind of hard to open, and it just makes it easier. So for tonight, you can easily just build your book without doing that and just do it later. You can kind of work it, but I just wanted to show you how to do that. All right, so I'm going to set that aside. And then I am going to get out my illustrated pages. So here they are. Let's see, there we go. A little blurry. I've already colored. I did include 3 title pages, not because you need 3 for your book, you only need 1, but I did it because I didn't want to waste paper. And I think for educators, if you have multiples, you can just pre-cut them and pass 1 out to each of your students, and then they can color it. But if you're wondering why there are 3, that's the only reason. I just didn't want to waste all this space, even though I do just need the 1. So I went ahead and I colored my pieces. And so I'm going to cut them out. I just use colored pencil. You can use marker or crayon. It's pretty easy to do. And then I'm just going to cut this out. And this will be on my title page. And I included a place where students can put their name, where you can put your name. And one thing I am going to say right now is I have not assembled this book with the brats. And the reason why I haven't done that yet is because our page 2, 3, and 4 with the elevations, they will be actually the width of the cardstock. And so I wouldn't want you to build your book with all of that and then have a hard time getting it to line up. But I did make your title page so that it easily just fits easily. It's not going to get interrupted by either side. So I can take my title, and grabbing a glue stick, I can adhere it to this first piece and set it aside. Okay. Just like this. There you go. And I can set that over there to dry. All right, so lower elevation. So when we're talking about our lower elevations, in this case, in our forest habitats that we have in Utah, I want to just first say that a lot of the plants, birds, and trees can be found in a variety of different elevations. And elevation is important to our forest because it dictates the adaptations and traits that trees, plants, and animal life, and in this case, we're focusing on birds, need to have to be able to survive in that particular elevation. And so even though we will be talking about certain things that could be found in other elevations, I just wanted you guys to understand that it's not this clear cut, well, we're at this elevation, so we're only going to find this tree here. No, sometimes we'll find it in a higher or a lower elevation, and it has certain adaptations already and characteristics about it that allows it to live in a variety of different elevations and different forest habitats. So this particular lower elevation that we're talking about, the adaptation of our pinyon jay, our rubber rabbit bush, and our Utah juniper do very well for this kind of a setting. Hold on one second. My notes all over the place. So let me get my book. So for example, our pinyon jay right here has a long pointed bill that allows it to access the pine seeds. And so it's able to get inside those pine cones to pull out pine seeds. It also has a featherless bill. So, and what that means is that some of this type of jay and its family have feathers on the base of its bill, but this one, the pinyon jay, does not, because as it pokes its bill into trying to retrieve the pine seeds, the sap that is in there, if it had feathers, it would get stuck, but it doesn't, so it allows it to extract those seeds because it doesn't have feathers at the base. So that's an adaptation. Another interesting thing about this particular bird, it has an expandable esophagus. And so it is able to eat a lot of seeds at one time because it can expand. And then it can carry it to where it needs it because they do like to collect and store for later. So that's some interesting things about this particular bird that allows it to live near this tree and in this environment. Now, when we look at the rubber rabbit bush, it has vivid color that, because of the color, attracts different pollinators to come to it. It can survive in arid climates. It also has like felt-like hairs on the leaves that help insulate the plant. So those are some of the characteristics and traits about this plant that helps it survive here. And then our Utah juniper right here, well, it has a deep taproot system that helps anchor it to the earth and helps it go deep to be able to get the moisture and the nutrients it needs to survive, particularly in the type of weather and climate that it can be found. It's also self-pruning, which I thought was an interesting thing, where it actually can shut off giving water to certain branches if there isn't enough precipitation at a certain time, just to protect itself so it can continue to live. And it also has a high tolerance for drought, cold, and heat, which there have been records of some of these trees surviving for like 700 years. So that's pretty fascinating in that area. So just to kind of demonstrate how you would assemble this particular piece, we built these illustrations so that cutting can be pretty easy. As you can see, I've already colored my background, and down below I have these columns for the bird, the plant, and the tree. These are places where you can write down different traits and adaptations or things that you find interesting about each of these, the plant and the birds in this area that you find fascinating as you record with your research. But as you cut this out, we did the dark outline to help it stand out visually, but also just to allow you just to cut around. So you're cutting around the contour of the line. You're not cutting on the line. You want to just follow the contour of it. This will allow you to be able to cut fast and instead of getting all the little tiny details. And all you have to do is cut straight across. You do not need to cut anything out, because when you go to do this lower elevation and glue it down, as you can see here, it fits the width. And if you line it up with the base, it fits perfectly on this particular page. Then cutting out the rest of your items and elements, you can then glue them. And it is okay for them to extend past the top of the page because, again, we're thinking about this idea of layers and moving up and things overlapping to create that sense of depth. I'm going to just set this aside and just point this out. So when we get to the middle elevation where our broadtail hummingbird can be found, along with the Rocky Mountain columbine amongst our quaking aspens, this one is not as tricky as it might look, but the scenery or the background is right here because it's anchored to the bottom. And then we've given you 2 additional trees, the columbine and the hummingbird, to cut out so that you can add them where you want on top of it. So same idea, you're just going to follow the contour just around, and then that piece will fit perfectly onto that 3rd page. So let me come here to show you. See, as you can see here, it fits perfectly to the base, cutting them out, and then you can choose where to put your other quaking aspens. And we gave you a couple extras because, as we know, quaking aspens grow in groves and there's a lot of them. So you can place them. And then down here, I placed some interesting adaptations and facts that I found interesting about each one of these down below. And then lastly, we're going to get to our high elevation. And on that high elevation page, as I said, we gave you 2 because we had more things, larger things to fit. All you need to do is cut out the mountainscape and glue that directly on. It fits perfectly, as you can see. And then we gave you 2 of the Engelmann spruces, but I just chose to put 1 along with my mountain chickadee and my mountain bluebell. Once you are done, you will, sorry, I forgot the word, hole punch 4 holes. You'll do 2 in the title, which will go through all 4 pages. Then you'll do 1 here that will get page 2, 3, and 4. And then you'll do 1 here, which will get 3 and 4. And that will hold your book together. And just a little tip, that one thing about brass fasteners that drive me crazy is they will spin sometimes, or they're kind of long. So what I like to do to keep them in place so they're not poking or anything is I like to put a little piece of tape on them to keep them secure. And here we have our layers book. So I'm going to conclude here, and I know you may be continuing to work on your book, but we're going to hop out here because I want to tie this to an art installation piece that is currently in process at the Ogden Nature Center here in Weber, oh my gosh, Weber County, right? Oh my gosh, I just forgot. Okay, so I'm going to have Sam go back to our slideshow. All right, so here are some images from a recent art installation piece that Weber State University Arts Learning Collaborative and the Ogden Nature Center partnered together with, receiving funding from the Hall Endowment. We worked with area elementary students to create faux stained glass pieces around birds and plants that are found in Utah habitats. So in this particular case, we didn't just focus on forest, but we also did wetlands and desert. We assembled these pieces together to be hung in the windows at the Ogden Nature Center's education building, which is a beautiful building that is super energy efficient. However, it is mostly made of windows. And as it sits in the middle of a nature reserve, it has caused issues with birds flying into the windows and dying. And so we have worked with Ogden Nature Center to create this installation piece that has 3 purposes. Number 1, it beautifies the space. The natural light coming in and hitting these faux stained glass pieces is pretty incredible. The colors are vivid, and the artwork by the students and Weber State students are pretty fantastic. Number 2, it educates, because these are plants and bird life that are found in the Utah habitat. So when you go in, you can learn and see what type of birds can be found in the desert, what kind of plant life can be found in the wetlands, etc. And lastly, because of the installation piece, it has been able to deter bird strikes, which has brought down the number of bird collisions with the windows. So as you can see in the title here, it's underlined. And when we would invite you to click on that link when you get this slideshow, and it will take you to a video that was recently made of our working with the students last fall in creating this piece and putting in the installation, and we'll give you more information about that. And I think the last thing I have here are just the fact sheet resources. So for the illustrations that we provided for you, here are the links so you can find out more information about the birds, the plants, and the trees that exist in the forest habitats found here in Utah in the different elevations.
Great, thank you, Erin. I would like to invite Elisa to come back and quickly let us know how we can share our artwork.
Yes, so you've been working on projects with me and with Erin, and you can keep on working those in the background. And at the very last, 10 minutes or so of the webinar, we'd love to take a look at what you've created. We've done this in the past. If you go back to the Padlet, here's the link, or you can scan this QR code with your phone or tablet, and scroll to the right, you'll see that there's a column that says art. And so you can actually upload a picture of your own work. So snap a picture of what you've been creating when you feel ready to share it. And then go to the Padlet, you'll hit the plus sign. I think if we go to the next slide, maybe, nope, I didn't do it. That's okay, hit the plus sign. Oh, this is it. And then you'll want to make sure that you're on the art column. You'll be able to see the word art, or pick the one that says art, and then upload your image. You can type your name or type information about it, and we'll look at these just for a few minutes toward the end of the slideshow or the webinar. We love to see what you create, so I'm really hoping that you share with us. Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. I will second that. We love seeing what you make during our webinars and seeing you out there creating. So next we have Kelly Bruce Glynn. She will lead us in exploring forest traits through movement.
Hello, my name's Kelly Bruce Glynn, and I'm here to share with you some strategies for integrating dance into your science lessons. Before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about dance, and dance being the ability to interpret, analyze, to creatively embody movement. Different from theater, where we're acting things out, we want to take information from the things around us in order to generate some creative movement to use for our choreography in the future. So let's get started. First, we're going to start with our science content, and we're going to talk about traits. Traits are features or characteristics that are passed down from parents to children in order for it to survive and thrive in its environment. Let's look at our forest habitat, where we have low, middle, and high elevations. At our low elevation, we're going to see plants that often have traits that allow it to survive in areas that have less water access. They might be pointy or sharp or a little bit drier. At our middle elevation, we have things like our ponderosa pine, that while still is long and narrow, has a bit of a softer edge to its leaves in order for it to sway in the breeze. At our high elevation, we have things like our aspen trees that have leaves that are nice and round in order for it to sustain those high force winds. Let's connect this to movement qualities. Your movement or shapes could be sharp, 1, 2, 3, or your movement could be nice and soft, 1, 2, 3. Or your movement could be rounded. 1, 2, 3. Let's bring this all together now. Thinking about the qualities in our traits and the qualities in our movement, we can blend these together. So first, let's look at our lower elevation, looking at our rabbit brush. Our rabbit brush is long and sharp, and it's at that low elevation, so we're going to drop to a low space, down. Let's try another one, long, low, down. Ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Excellent. If your students are still struggling with creating creative movement that doesn't just mimic or look exactly like the images they're seeing, don't be afraid to change it up and try different body parts, moving your arms, your head, your back, or your knees in order to produce that really creative movement. Next, let's look at our middle elevation. At that middle elevation, we're going to see something like our ponderosa pine. Again, it is long, but the leaves are nice and soft so it can sway in the breeze. We're going to go to that medium space. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Soft shape 1, soft shape 2, soft shape 3. Now we're going to go to our high level, that quaking aspen. So it's tall, it's slender, but those leaves are nice and rounded. So we'll make a tall, long shape around 1, 2, even upside down 3. Great work. Now it's time for your students to research and create on their own. Break your students into groups of 3. Each group will have low, middle, or high elevation. From there, students will either select plants from the list that you just explored or by researching their own. They're going to write down all the traits and the qualities of movement that they can see when exploring and researching that topic. Have them create their own shapes. Once they've researched their own shapes, it's time to come together. As a class, bring them together and place them around the perimeter of the room, leaving the center of the room empty. First, call out low-level elevation. Any student who did research on this sort of plant is going to run to the center of the room and create their low shape. Before they walk away, have your other students walk around as if they're at a museum. Analyze, what are you seeing? What qualities do you notice? And what patterns are there? Repeat this process for our middle and high elevation levels. Lastly, before you allow students to go and reflect, bring everyone together to create one great environment. Have your students who are at the low level of elevation run forward as close as they can get, make their creative shapes in the front part of the classroom. Repeat it with your middle at the middle part of your classroom. And then again with your high elevations at the back part of your classroom in those nice high rounded shapes that you would see. Make sure you capture a picture before you let them go. Bring your class all together now for reflection. Think about how the qualities in that movement help us as an audience understand what the choreographer or the person who's creating the dance is trying to say. Think about how qualities of movements help movements stand out or thrive or blend in and survive. Have the same conversation about the science content. How do the traits in these plants help that plant survive and thrive at those different elevation levels? Thank you so much for moving with me today. I'm so excited to see the great things that happen in your classroom, and happy dancing.
Now we'll hear from Penny Kaywood, who will lead us in exploring forest ecosystems through drama.
Hi, I'm Penelope Kaywood, and I'm the Artistic Director of Youth Theater at the University of Utah and a teaching artist who is focused on arts integration. Today, I'm excited to share a few simple and powerful drama strategies to explore forest ecosystems in your classroom. We will look at a sequence of 4 interconnected activities: a vocabulary museum game, a tableau gallery, a living diorama, and a narrative pantomime based on a foresty poem. Today's first strategy is called the vocabulary museum game, and it's a fantastic way to help students physically explore key forest ecosystem terms. Here's how it works. One student, the art critic, is sent out of the room while the rest of the class secretly selects a vocabulary word to bring to life from their list. Then students create a frozen statue that represents the term just using their body. No sounds, no words, just shape, level, gesture, and imagination. So let's say you chose the word canopy for the class. The Kids might then stretch their arms out high or wide like branches shading a forest floor. Or they may be fungi and they can curl up into a little mushroom shape with their fingers dancing like spores. As the teacher, you can decide if they're going to be still shapes or if they can do slow motion in a slow motion movement loop, whatever captures the idea best. Once all of the students are ready with a statue shape or movement, the art critic is invited back into the room. They slowly walk through the museum of statues and try to guess what vocabulary word the class is portraying. But they don't just guess, they respond like a real critic using a critic's prompt card to guide their thinking. Questions like, what physical choices do you see? What forest word could represent this? How does this concept function in an ecosystem? And my favorite, if this image could speak, what would it say? After the guess is revealed, we rotate critics and do another round with a new word. At the end of the game, each critic can give a Critics' Choice Award, something creative like Best Tableau, Most Expressive Branch, Strongest Ecosystem Connection, or Most Mysterious Mushroom. It's a really fun and embodied way to build science vocabulary and collaboration, and kids love the chance to be both performers and science interpreters. You can even take it another step further with something I call a living diorama. In this activity, each student becomes a component of the forest: sunlight or rain or mycelium, an owl or a decomposer. As you narrate a part of your text, a definition or a poem like I'm going to share with you, the students can bring the forest to life with small repeated movements. This gives a sense of the interdependence of a forest ecosystem and is especially powerful when you can find students that are creating their own mini scenes and linking their roles together. Last is narrative pantomime. You can use narrative pantomime with this poem that I'm going to share with you today. This kind of text is perfect for students to embody forest concepts while listening. You can narrate it live or use a student recorded version for added ownership. Gentle forest soundscapes or music can be layered to create the perfect mood. Voices of the forest. Beneath tall trees where breezes play, the canopy shields the light of day. Leaves catch sunlight, arms out wide, roots grow deep where fungi hide. The understory hums below with fox and fern in quiet show. A deer soft steps, a woodpecker's beat. The habitat feels calm and sweet. A decomposer turns the ground, mushrooms rise without a sound. The nutrient cycle spins unseen, feeding the soil where life has been. Each part has a purpose, big and small. Biodiversity sustains it all. Together, every voice and tree compose the forest's symphony. Drama helps students move beyond memorization. They begin to experience ecosystems, embodying scientific ideas and seeing themselves as part of the natural world. Thanks for watching and for the work that you do to bring creativity into Utah classrooms. If you try one of these activities, I'd love to hear about it. Thank you.
Great. So we want to thank Kelly and Penny for filming those videos for us. Penny also sent really wonderful resources over giving an overview of all those activities that she shared, as well as the poem. So all of that will be in the digital resource folder when you get that. This is just a reminder, you can share your artwork at any point. We are very close to looking at what you've created. So this is that Padlet QR code again, as well as the link, which we can drop in the chat again, or you can scroll up and find it where we have shared it before. And now I would like to invite Amy Miner back to wrap things up for us.
So hopefully you enjoyed all the different aspects and the connections to the standards. So because we started with the science standards as the foundation or the forest floor to our conversation today, I want to build on that and make those connections to other content areas. Go ahead, Samantha, and move ahead 2 different screens. The driving questions as we have been going through this is, what can we learn from Utah forests? So first of all, I want to connect us back to English language arts standards and the reading of The Walk Through the Woods, as well as the poem that Penny just shared with us with the drama connections. Whenever we're engaging in children's literature and bringing literature into our classrooms, we're reading text that informs both fictional and nonfiction text or informative text. And we're also really engaging students in those speaking and listening standards. So I loved the examples of taking speaking and listening and moving it towards movement and some of the other art forms. Let's go ahead and look at the next one. When we examined the opportunities to integrate with music, I loved how Samantha brought in this idea of rhythmic and melodic patterns. Notice how through the different examples she shared, we explored tonalities, meters, even some chord changes. And depending on the age of your students, she talked about more advanced students moving into the iconic notation and really building and combining sequences for personal rhythmic and melodic ideas. For me, the connections with this are all of the different integrated connections back to the forest floor, the kinds of sounds we would hear, the kinds of patterns and rhythms. And if you remember back to our engineering standards, patterns is one of the key things that we're looking at. Okay, let's look at visual art with Erin. One of the standards that I love most in our visual art standards is this idea of just investigating personal ideas through art making, through a variety of artistic processes and materials. But when we look closer at that book, notice how students are individually constructing a representation of a place, the forest, that's a part of everyday life by observing the surroundings. So I think that it's a beautifully integrated activity, and that's a visual art standard that goes across K-6 in helping students make those connections. All right, let's make some connections back to dance. Of course, that was super clear when we were talking about various levels, the low, medium, and high. Even when she talked about being at the near, the mid, the far sections as we're looking at different pathway designs and focus. I also loved how she created locomotor and non-locomotor sequences, that fast, slow, sharp, smooth, rounded, bringing in all of those elements of dance into the examples that she shared. And then let's wrap up with drama as we talk about what Penny did. One of the things that I think really stood out to me was just the ability to really observe and listen in character, whether we're exploring vocabulary words and playing that game, the museum game of stepping back. And I also really loved how she brought in that idea of constructive feedback or the critic as we analyze the different tableaus and the shapes that were being made as part of those different activities. So the next slide really just gives you an invitation as you're thinking about integration to ask yourself the question, what works best in your school, your classroom, with your students? As a classroom teacher myself, one of the things I would often think about as I was planning integrated opportunities was thinking about those individual kids that may be hard to reach, that I wasn't able to get in other lessons. Through an integrated approach, I was able to make those connections. For example, when I was teaching 3rd grade, I had a little boy named Daniel. It didn't matter what we were learning. If I get connected back to fossils and science, I had him. So thinking about integration as a way to create greater access for our students is one more way that we expand the possibilities of this work. And then as we wrap up, I hope that you'll be thinking about all the connections that we learned from the forest. We explored science, we explored engineering design, we even engaged in some of those critical life skills and social emotional skills around creativity and communication, even problem solving. And how do we demonstrate responsibly as citizens that live and engage with these various habitats and ecosystems? So one of the beautiful parts of integration is it gives us a chance to apply, to transfer, and to share our knowledge in various ways that maybe we would otherwise not be able to if we had just stuck strictly with the content in the academic spaces. So I hope you'll think about integration in a different sort of way. Love the examples today. They were really tight with the content, with the standards. Everything that's been shared in this webinar is both aligned with the principles and research associated with integration, but also with all of those academic standards. So thanks everyone for the great work and the great brainstorming. I'll turn it back over to Samantha.
Thank you so much, Amy. In a few minutes, we'll have a Q&A portion of the webinar. Please feel free to start entering your questions for our presenters in the Q&A feature. If you want to address a specific person, you can certainly do that in your question. And now I'm going to ask Elisa to come back on and lead us through our art sharing.
Yes, I've been noticing a few of you are dropping your artwork there into the Padlet. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to slide way over here to where it says art. And then if I click on this button, I'm hoping you can see that. This is the first example. I did this actually with teachers at an elementary school in town. And I tell you, when they started adding their pieces, they loved it. That's kind of a work in progress of that project. These are just a few of my examples. And this is one that has come in. I love seeing, I think that's a little pica. Awesome work. That's again my example. Beautiful forest book. Yep, I love that book. And that's kind of the end of what's right now in the art column. I noticed it might be a little bit, I'm going to scroll over here and look at the bottom of grasses because, yep, it's easy to put it right here. Ooh, those are beautiful, beautiful drawings of animals. I love them. Okay, that's all we've got turned in so far, but someone asked in the questions or in the chat, I'm going to stop the share. Well, let's see if there's anything else. Someone asked in the chat, can we add things later? Absolutely. This Padlet will stay live, so you're welcome to go back and look at it again later and, at least for several months. And add your work later as well. So I'm going to stop the share and continue to add your art if you'd like to do that. And I think we'll go to the Q&A.
All right, thanks. Let's revisit our learning intentions and success criteria. We hope you have at least one idea how you can integrate the science of Utah's forest habitats and an art form in your classroom, and that you see intersections and alignments between the USBE standards. We love to see your work. If you use any of the ideas or activities from tonight's webinar in your classroom, we would love to see photos. If you send photos to me, if you were doing this in your classroom with your students by June 6, 2025, we will enter you to win a $50 Amazon gift card. And now it's time for the Q&A portion. We only have a few minutes left, but we will do this. I would like to invite all our presenters to turn their cameras back on. And just as a reminder, please submit any questions you have using the Q&A feature. All right, we have a couple coming in the chat. We have, when do you find the arts integration activities best maybe fit in the overall unit? Do you teach first and then do the activities, or pepper throughout? It's a great question.
That one.
Yeah, please.
So I think that's a question that's often asked whenever we engage in integration. So I think it depends on what your role is. If you're teaching in a visual arts space, then you should teach the visual arts content first. That is your primary responsibility, and that's the content area that you're responsible for. Likewise, if you're teaching music, etc. If you're a classroom teacher and your main priority is to teach some of those other content areas, then you could perhaps partner and collaborate with the art specialist in your school, the music specialist, and create a plan to do that together. Some of my most favorite examples is when I'm teaching in class, and I'll teach the science class to my third graders, the content there, but I've already partnered and collaborated with Erin as the visual artist. So I know that when my students go to work with Erin, she's building on the vocabulary I've introduced. I know what kind of activity she's going to engage them in to transfer and apply. So then I can then reinforce that back into my classroom. And I know that not all schools and not all teachers have the opportunity to do a lot of planning and collaborating, but even over email or text, even those kind of things, just sharing lesson plans and ideas is a great way to make those connections. So I think as you're brainstorming around that, teach the essential content that you're most connected to with your job responsibilities, but then reinforce throughout any opportunity you have, like you're using your exact question, to pepper that throughout or to integrate that throughout the content is the ideal.
Great, thanks. We have a bunch of questions coming into the chat, which is great. We also, I just want to remind everybody that we do have a survey at the end of this. So I know we're getting a little close to time. Please make sure that you stick around for our survey link. We will try to answer questions efficiently as we do this. Let's see, this is a great question that I don't know if we know the answer to. Are there any online tools that we could use for the ostinato activity, online musical instruments? I don't know.
I think
Probably.
I use some online boomwhackers and online xylophones. Just Google that and you'll find some really great ones. So yeah.
Cool. Where can you buy it says cardboard like paper, I think maybe the chipboard?
Yep,
Everywhere. Amazon.
Yeah, I got that from Amazon, but I actually chose that because you could use stereo boxes and, cracker boxes in your own classroom. So I would do that rather than purchasing it, but you can just get it, just Google chipboard or look at Amazon.
Is it helpful to usually have a rubric to grade the art activity, or is it mostly an experience to support other learning?
I guess I'll take that for a second. I think it depends on, hold on a sec. I think it depends on what the objective of the activity is. Particularly since in this case, the illustrations were already drawn. But that's not what I would even be looking for. For me as a visual art teacher, I'd be looking to see if they hit that sense of overlapping, if they were able to create that sense. So if I felt like that was something that I was looking for and wanted to assess formally, then possibly I would create a rubric. And it would also depend on the age of the student as well. But sometimes I think there is some very valuable in having them just experience it and build together without that pressure too. So I don't know if that helps, but for me, it kind of depends on the objective, what I want to get and assess at the end.
And I'd like to add, if you're a classroom teacher and you're adding that art in, rather than grading them on their art or their skill, I'd like to have them do a reflection. And so maybe grade them on, are they able to talk about what they learned, or maybe not even rubric it, but let them reflect on what they got out of that experience. I think that's powerful and useful, maybe more than a grade in that case.
And I would add to what Elisa was saying is I would add a component to your rubric and your reflection in which they think about what they did individually and collectively with others. Because that idea of collaboration in so many of the arts is essential. So how did we work well as a team? How did we respect? How did we provide feedback? How did we create together in those ways. And that also brings out some of those top 4 artistic strands around responding, creating, etc., into the actual process and not just the ending product.
And I'll piggyback onto that a little bit, Amy, and that is you can make your rubric really quite easy, such as, did it happen? Did they experience? And then reflection could be how they felt they saw it or how they experienced it. So keeping it without necessarily being super grade orientated, just a matter of, and again, reflection helps them think about what was most important to them. And I think that can be really key too.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I think we hit all the questions. There are some good comments in the chat as well. We are going to put that survey link in the chat. Just as a reminder, you must complete the survey to receive your relicensure hours. After we, doing 2 things at once here. After we receive your completed survey, we will load your relicensure hours into Midas. We'll also email you a link to the Google folder that we've been talking about all night with information, resources from today's webinar. Recording of this webinar will also be in that folder and uploaded to our YouTube channel. You should receive your relicensure hours and the Google folder by Friday, April 18th. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, A Glimpse into the Forest. We will stay on the webinar for a few more minutes as people complete their surveys and sign off. Have a great night. Thank you so much.